Our Lesson 2, Cranking System Task. Describe the application fundamental with electrical with the starting system component to give you the information principle, operation, construction, and cranking mode of the starter drives. Lesson standard references TM9 8000. Learning Event 1. Describe the principle of the construction and operation of the cranking mode of the starter drive. An introduction. Automatic with the electrical system includes the starter motor, which will play with the hand cranky with the starter cores with a bygone date. The purpose of the starter, also called the cranking motor, is to rotate the engine crankshaft of the engine can begin to operate under the tone power of the start of the motor with the low resistance of the direct current motor produce the higher torque with the draw of the current directly from the battery. Purpose of the cranking motor like the generator simply means with the changing energy from one form to the other, and generally with the take of the mechanical energy, turning of the pulley with the changing with electrical energy with the cranking motor that does just the opposite with the generator. Electrical energy sends to the motor, this motor and chain with the mechanical energy crank with the engine. This particular motor must produce continuous rotation. Addition must develop the twisting and the turning force with the call of the torque. In this lesson, we will see whether the starter motor develop the torque and how it achieves the crank of the engine. Principle of the motor. Magnetic particle principle of attraction and repulsion with the unlike poles attract with the like poles repel. These are the principle applied with the development of the electrical motor. Remember the wire and carrying electrical current produced with the magnetic field, while the wire is played with the magnetic field of another magnetic. The mechanical motion is produced because of the magnetic field around the wire is repulsed or pushed away with the field around the another magnet. Mechanical motion produced with the magnetic repulsion. Line of force to move from the north pole to the south pole travel almost in straight lines. In the fact, the lines would be straight ends of the magnets while flat instead of curved. The magnetic line with the forcing move between the north and south pole of the magnet always take easiest path of the route. With the easiest path of the route is the two pole with the usually straight line because of the straight line, but it's also the shortest path. Remember the area of the magnetic line with the force move parallel side to side, and other line with the force, so they will not cross each other. Line force over the a lot like rubber bands stretched between the two bags and intend to be straightened out. Pull down with the stretched rubber band with your finger. If the bands are stretched tightly, you can feel them push up against the finger. Now move your finger away quickly. Rubber bands will snap back in the straight lines again. When they think of the magnetic lines, force between the two poles of magnet acting on the same way to do is stretch bands. Figure 18 shows a simple DC motor. The illustration shows the line of the force around with the current carrying conductor wire. The positive plus signs ends of the means of the carrying the flow away from the views of the wire, while the current flowing in the direction line with the force magnetic field around the wire are moving counterclockwise. Not always the lines of force and the current with the flowing toward the edge of the view of the wire. The lines of force would be moving clockwise. In other words, the polarity would be reversed. If current carrying was played with the magnetic field with the figure 18, notice what happens to the lines with the force of the acting move of the north pole, south pole of the magnet. They were forced to bend, but just as they stretched the rubber band, were forced to the bend with the press them on with the finger with the lines of the traveling north and south of the bend down. In this case, they're pushing downward the counterclockwise rotation line of force or current carrying wire because the lines of force of the north and southeast of the magnet with the straighten out with the rubber bands, force of the current carrying wire up note with the air with the current can move the opposite direction of the wire magnet line first with the push down on the wire. In the starter mode, like the generator, can increase the strength of the poles of the shoe, will increase the number of lines of force, but likewise, increase the current flow of the wires will increase the strength of the magnetic force upon the wire. When the magnetic force opposes on each other, they try to push away each other. The opposing force can vary greatly with the varying enough current to make a magnetic field very strong. Now let's bend the wire with a loop at the place of the loop in the magnetic field. Now this happens within the same of the current with the loop, of the current flowing through the loop of the magnetic lines of the floor, push up the right side of the loop and down on the left side of the procedure of the rotor. The rotate of the enough to the counterclockwise to the left. That actually loop would probably move only 1/4 of the revolution, 90 degrees, because it would only out over the magnetic field of the magnet. Loop would then be straight up and down instead of the cross and shown. To get continuous rotation, we need a magnetic field large enough to contain the loop. We would also need communicator bars, brushes like we had in a generator. Of course, a single loop would not produce enough torque to crank the engine, but by using many loops, even in which own communicator bars, we have a cranking motor that will produce all of the torque needed. Alright, most starter motors are a series motor, but they call it series motor because the rotating loop of the winding of the magnetic poles are connected in one series path. The current flowing through the loops of the flow with the windings, the actual motoring of the windings are pole shoes called with the field windings because they'll help to produce the magnetic field. The purpose of the field winding is to produce the strong magnetic field so the loops will receive the more powerful push. The poles are curved in conductors of the loop so they are closed and possible with the poles as they pass. as they move past. Some magnetic fields are strong enough near the pole of the conductors in the loop to give them a stronger push. Actual cranking motor, there are many rotating loops also assembled in the armature. The armature consists of the shaft of laminated iron core commutator mounted. The loops and winding of the armature mounted with the core and the insulated for another from the core. Communicator segments of rise bars like generated which for the ends of the armature winding are connected by soldering. Alright, this shows your cranking motor construction. Typical 19 starting motor. Shows a brush, ground and hole brush, and a brush assembly. A grommet, bushing, pole shoe, armature field coils, arm adjuster, assister spring, overrunning clutch, armature shaft, bushing, pinion stop, spiral spring, shifter lever, returning spring, solenoid, plunger. The vehicle cranking motor has only one job to do. When turning with the crankshaft, the speed shaft is enough for the start of the engine. There is different type of the side of the engine, but there are many types of the side of the cranking motors. The common starter mode of the military vehicle with the content of the following five main assembly. The armature field frame with the communicator end housing drive mechanism. Field windings frame and armature almost the same as the generator which have already studied, except for the starter motor. The windings are much heavier than in order to carry a lot of current. Communicator end of the housing for the brush for the brush holders, brushes, and a bearing. Driver ending housing, driving the mechanism, usually mounting flange to mount to start the engine. Starter driver. The starter usually drives the engine through the pinion small area mounted the start motor over the armature shaft of the starter motor running with the pinion gear with the end engages the mesh with the large gear mounted with the range rim of the engine flywheel. Two-tire starter drive mechanism of the Bendix drive with the overrunning clutch. Drive. This shows your Bendix start drive, lock and pinion dent, armature anti-drift pin, lock pin, overrunning clutch pin, drive pin, anchor plate. The Bendix drive consists of the threaded screw of the fastening with the armor shaft, with the drive spring, with the drive pin, with the threaded pin on its sleeve. The pinion is weighed on with the one side of the make it unbalanced. Think of the sleeve of the bolt, and the pinion is not threaded to the bolt. The weight is attached with the nut. When we spin the bolt, and the nut becomes the weight of the tries to stand still. However, the spinning bolt would force the nut to move forward and backward in threads, depending on when the bolt was spinning. Alright, suppose your armature had started turn minion with which is not turning because of the weight of it on one side of the movement of the flywheel ring gear. The teeth of the pinion gear have been meshed and engaged with the teeth of the ring gear of the pinion have the reach of the top. It cannot move any further with the threaded sleeve. It is not locked to the sleeve, but must turn with it. The now rotating pin turns the flywheel gear with the rotate the flywheel ring gear with the engage with the crankshaft. If the engine starts with the speed of the rotation faster than that of the pinion of the ring gear with the now drive, the pinion begins because of the ring turn faster. The pinion moves back on the thread sleeve to disengage with the ring gear. Sometimes the engine starts but fails to continue to run. However, these few turns just run with the baby enough to force the Bendix drive pinion out of mesh. To keep this happening with the new type of the Bendix drive, you with the one latest model vehicle with the drive is called the Bendix fall through. Instead of the drive with spring-loaded pinion, the pinion move is engaged the flywheel gear with the pinion enters the notch on the threaded sleeve to hold the pinion and mesh. As long as the engine turns slowly, the pinion will hold the mesh with the flywheel pin with the notch on the sleeve. The engine starts the operating speed at 400 RPM over the pinion, which is now springing at the rate of several thousand RPM that will force a pin out of the notch of the sleeve. The pinion then can move back on the threaded sleeve away from the flywheel. If the overrunning clutch type start drive with the pinion shift is engagement with the flywheels with a lever. Drive with the overrunning clutch is internal inside splines with the external splines on the starter armature shaft. The drive pinion is attached to the rotor, which forms the inner half of the overrunning clutch. Alright, your overrunning clutch. Let's see this. They got a collar, a shelled shell sleeve assembly, the clutch spring, rotor, pinion assembly, bushings, roller, plunger, springs. Alright, now look at the end of the overrunning clutch. We realize one way clutch the drive in one direction, but not the other. The outer shell of the spline sleeve with the rotate of the starter armature rotates once below between the shell of the rotor of the forward spring load of the rollers between them. Note that the rollers are slot and sleeve. They can move with the back and forth with the slide. The slots are taped slightly with the slower on the sleeve. The rotate the rollers move and the tapered slide at the point when they can be wedge jammed between the sleeve and the rotor. When the roll clutch turns a single unit, the engine cranks the rolls and turns their force other way in the slots. Because the pinion and rotor are now travel faster on the overrunning clutch sleeve. You can easily test the action clutch or gripping the sleeve by one hand over the pinion while the other. Turning the pinion either direction, you will find it can turn you can turn it one way, but if you turn it the opposite way, it locks. And if you can't, in fact, you can't turn it both ways. It's defective and must be replaced. A shift lever, also called a yoke lever, is used with the overrunning clutch to shift the starter pinion into mesh of the flywheel gear lever. May be operated manually with the linkage and an electrical magnet. Or the gear reduction operation obtained with having smaller starter pinion. The gear drive, larger flywheel is in about with a 12 to 1 more of these speed with this rotational speed. Starter armature is about 12 times with the flywheel with the engine is being cranked. The pinion with the gear with the armature meshes directly with the gear teeth with the flywheels, and some instances they have the double the reduction is needed with the final gear with the ratio is from 25 to 1 to even 40 to 1 with a double the reduction with the gear armature shaft that does directly at one with the teeth of the flywheel instead of the mesh with the immediately gear with the drive with the flywheel driven the engine. This double reduction permits the use of the smaller starter motor to return a fairly large engine. The overrunning clutch drive that usually must have the shift fork with the linkage shaft over the pinion with the mesh with the flywheel gear always ready to say. Linkage may be operated mechanically, electrically operated with a unit called with the solenoid is used. A solenoid electromagnet move with the core plunger with the move then the top of the starter of the motor with the starter switch of the vehicle instrument panel is depressed in some case with the key operated with the switch with the winding solenoid created with electromagnet. When the shift plunger is released, but position being held there with contact spring with the nail of the current flowing, because of the switch of the solenoid winding is open, the starter pinion is not engaged to the flywheel. The switch of the solenoid winding is closed. Solenoid coil of the electromagnet pulls the solenoid plunger to the left. The action shift the point of the mesh of the flywheel, then close the starter switch, and now current flows through the starter motor, causing the armature to rotate. When the switch of the solenoid winding is open and the spring pushes the back on the plunger, this breaks the circuit of the starter and pulls the pinion back away from the flywheel. Waterproof starters. Military technical fields are expected to forward water deep enough to cover the starter. Have the waterproof starter. The starters are completely sealed with no water can enter them. Bearings are lubricated originally. Assembly needed and their attention to be overhauls. The Autolite starting motor of the model MCZ 405 UT is typical starter motor used today in military vehicles. A steel-type waterproof starter is used with a quarter-ton mill truck 151. Motor operated with a 24-volt 4-pole 4-brushing unit designed underwater with the operating completely waterproof unless used in water-flowing fly house of gasket with a steel starter with a flywheel housing. The starter is mounted with a 2-wheel fly housing stud held in place by the 2 nuts and 2 nut lock washers. The the 3 bushing type of the pin would be required to lubricate and are used as supporting arm shaft. There's one bearing end of each plate. One of the flywheel housing with the engine, the starter of the drive with the Bendix follow-through type. Then the play of the armature itself with the allowable limits with the flush washer of the various thickness. The 2 pole pieces, soft iron shoes are attached to the starter frame of the countersunk screws. Field 1 in coil position and 2 pole pieces, two of the pole pieces opposite each other. Give 4-pole action with the 2 field windings and internal resistance kept low because there are only 2 windings. Well, the starter is closed, the currents pass through the 2 ground brushes to have the communicator loaded with the armature shaft of the armature for the number of the heavy wires wound in such a manner to produce the magnetic field. After flowing through the armature winding, the current is directed to the 2 insulated brushes of the 2 field windings of the pole piece to become magnetized. Magnetic field of the pole piece of the opposite of the magnetic field of the armature causes the armature to rotate the direction of the rotation counterclockwise is viewed with the driver end of the starter of the driver direction of the rotation as opposed to the motor starts, but the starter is mounted over the transmission instead of being mounted on the engine. This page is intentionally left blank, and then we go on to practice exercise. Answer practice exercise. And lesson 3, ignition systems. We're going to quit there.